I'm Henny B, and welcome to the World War I Stories podcast, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it. Some scenes in these stories may be too graphic for sensitive listeners, so listener discretion is advised. Today's episode, The Shadow of the Church. Fear masked her anxiety, or were they working hand in hand? She did not know. She could only watch hopelessly as the train rolled into the station, the train that would most likely tear her world apart. 2 years was a long time, and that's how long it had been since she had last seen her husband. They had married beneath the shade of an olive tree in a small square of their village outside of Lisbon. She had been 17, he 19. The wedding was hastily arranged, for he had been conscripted into the Portuguese Expeditionary Corps, bound for the battlefields of France. They had spent 3 weeks together before he went away. 3 wonderful weeks she would never forget. But the revelation that awaited him on this day would surely soil those weeks, at least in his mind. The train hissed to a stop, steam billowing around its wheels. Her heart hammered against her chest as the doors began to open and passengers disembarked. The war raged still in France and Belgium, but he was coming home. Why? Because he was injured. Seconds, then minutes dragged by as she stood on tiptoe, straining to see over the heads of those in front of her. Where was he? She asked herself. Finally, she spotted him as he stepped off the train and into the steam curling from beneath the carriage. His tall frame was thinner, his face older, and then there was the eye patch, the thing his letter had tried to prepare her for. She waved both arms in the air. She wanted to cry out his name, but the noise of the railway and the din of the voices would have swallowed it whole. To her relief, and partially to her dismay, he saw her. He dropped his bag and began to run towards her. Almost instantly, he stumbled and fell. Instinctively, she rushed to help him. He looked up at her with the most radiant smile she had ever seen, and guilt coursed through her. He was visibly embarrassed by the fall. My leg doesn't seem to want to work normally anymore. I'll have to remember that. Then she melted into his arms like it was the most natural thing in the world. Inês Carvalho burst into tears in her husband Manuel's arms. She broke when the man behind them spoke. I love a good reunion. Inês had almost forgotten that he had come with her. She had thought it was a bad idea, but Tiago Silva, Manuel's best friend, had convinced her otherwise. She watched as Manuel broke free from her embrace and approached his friend. Tiago, I'm surprised to see you. Inês did not wish to come alone, and her parents are sick, so I agreed to accompany her. It was true. Her parents were unwell, but she had wanted to come by herself, to face Manuel on her own terms. Yet, when Tiago offered, she hadn't found the strength to refuse him. His presence was familiar, and familiar was easier than being alone with her thoughts. Come, Tiago said. It's a short walk to the horses. And didn't I tell you to watch out for shrapnel out there? Manuel gave him a playful punch on the arm. Be glad you weren't conscripted. The ride back to the small cabin just outside the city was short. Inês sat behind Manuel on the horse as they rode bareback. She held him tight as the sound of the hooves beating the dirt almost lulled her to sleep. Her thoughts drifted back to the day she had received the letter. She did not often get mail, and when she did, it went to her parents' home, which was adjacent to hers. Her mother, also named Inês, had not even knocked. She had barged in the way she used to when her daughter was a child and had done something wrong. Santina! Her mother had called her that since she was a little girl, little saint. In fact, she almost never called her Inês. Sit, my love, this is from the government. She handed her the letter and, in her anxious fashion, sat quickly beside her daughter, fidgeting nervously as Inez inspected the dirty brown envelope which had ink running in places. Inez remembered her hands shaking as she attempted to open the envelope. It took 3 tries, but she finally was able to slide her finger under the sleeve just enough to catch and remove the letter. It was on official letterhead, strikingly white. It was quite the contrast from the dirty envelope from whence it emerged. Her eyes welled with tears as she read the first 5 words. "We regret to inform you." She did not have to read the rest. She knew. Or she thought she knew. Mistakes happen, she thought now as the trio trotted along the lane towards the small cabin. The government had made one when they told her he was dead. But did that make her mistake justified? Probably not. Manuel hopped off the horse first and held out his hand to help her down. One thing had not changed. He was ever so chivalrous. Tiago motioned them towards the house. "You two go in. We have much to discuss. I'll put the horses up." As Inez led Manuel towards the cabin, he asked the dreaded question. What does he mean, "we have much to discuss"? But before she could answer, the door opened, and they were met by Joanna, Inez's sister. "Joanna, what are you doing here?" he asked. "I was actually just leaving. I only wanted to see you. That's all." She scurried past him without meeting his eye. She doesn't have to make it so uncomfortable, Inez thought. It was awkward enough as it was. Once inside, she led Manuel to the far end of the 2-room cabin. She pointed, and she could see the thought process unfold across his face. First, confusion, then recognition, and finally, the shock that hollowed his expression. His gaze locked on the cradle in the corner, on the tiny bundle resting within it. He stood in silence for a long moment before he spoke, his voice low and uncertain. "What's this?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. Tears welled in her eyes as she crossed the room and reached for the folded paper she had kept hidden away, the death notice from the government. With trembling hands, she placed it in Manuel's, watching as his single eye scanned the lines that had once shattered her world. "We thought you were dead." Even though she knew Tiago was there, his voice startled her. She had assumed he was still outside tending to the horses. Tiago went on. "We did not find out you were alive until last month. By then, the baby was here." She could only watch as Manuel's expression shifted, his features twisting and softening in turn. She could not tell what it was she saw. Was it sorrow, or was it anger? Without saying a word, Manuel walked out of the cabin, leaving her alone with Tiago and their son. The morning sun broke through the only window in the cabin as the door opened. Inez, who had been up all night, sat on the bed as Manuel slowly walked in. "Where's Tiago?" he asked. "We felt it was best he left. He is at his parents'." Manuel limped across the room and sat beside Inez on the bed. His gaze flicked towards the cradle. "I am still in shock," he whispered. "I'm sorry." She tried to hold back the tears, but they burst through like a dam. "We thought you were dead. They told me you were dead. But that doesn't make it right. I know that now." She pleaded through her tears. "I need to speak with Tiago." With that, he rose and limped out the door, leaving her balanced on a knife's edge. She had been lonely in the months after she received the letter. Tiago had been there for her, to comfort her, to wipe her tears. They had never meant to fall in love. It had happened gradually over long months of grief, but it had happened. She had been a young widow, a grieving widow, one who needed someone, and she had found Tiago. She remembered her parents telling her that enough time had passed, that her mourning was behind her, that it was all right to remarry. So she had. She had fallen with child almost instantly, and 3 months ago their son had been born. Her grief was tempered by the child's presence and the steady comfort of Tiago. Then, when the baby was only 2 months old, another letter arrived. In fact, there were two. The first was from the government. They admitted their mistake. Manuel Carvalho was not deceased. They expressed their regrets and apologized profusely for any inconvenience this misinformation had caused. She had looked at the baby. That's not an inconvenience, but this letter certainly is. The second letter was from Manuel himself. He had been injured, shrapnel to his left leg and his face, and he had lost his eye. The baby started to coo, and she lifted him from the cradle. She rocked him as she awaited what was to come. It was near midnight when she finally slipped into a soft slumber, her tears having drained the last of her strength. The village had accepted the death notice and allowed her to remarry. But Portugal was still a Catholic country, and in the eyes of the Church, Manuel remained her true husband. Her union with Tiago and the child they had brought into the world would be branded a sin, no matter the circumstances. She remembered sitting in a pew at the front of Father Silvio's little church, where she had attended Mass 3 times a week. "What troubles you, my child?" he had asked. "I received this letter today." She handed him the page, the one that explained the government's mistake, the one that told her Manuel was still alive and coming home. She watched him read, his eyes wandering as he took in the words. "He's alive?" he whispered. She nodded, though he did not look up to see it. "He is alive," he repeated, louder this time. "Yes, and he's coming home." "This is wonderful news," he exclaimed. "But, Father, I married Tiago." His face fell as the fact came back to him. "Oh, yes, so you did. And we had a baby. You christened him." "Yes, these are facts, my child." "What do I do?" she asked, almost pleading. "In the eyes of the Church and of God, Manuel is your husband. But you gave me permission to remarry when I showed you the death notice." "I know I did, child, and that was me giving you forgiveness. But my forgiveness means nothing in the eyes of God. In His eyes." He paused, glancing at her as tears welled in her eyes. "In His eyes, you're a sinner." Anger surged through her. "But you are the Word of God on earth. How is it sinful for me to remarry, but not sinful for you to give permission?" He raised both hands in a defensive gesture. "I did not know he was alive when I gave permission." She rose to her feet, her voice sharp. "I didn't either. None of us did. So how can it be a sin?" "I do not make the rules, my child. God does. The Church only abides." He stood and began to pace before her. She sat in silence, bracing for what would come next. "There is a way to return to the good graces of God and the Church," he said at last, "but I fear you will not like it." "I'm listening." "You must cut all ties with Tiago." She sat a moment, still silent. She felt he was not finished. "And the baby." She had been right. The sound of the door opening woke her. It was pitch black. There were 2 shadows at the door in the moonlight. "Manuel?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, and Tiago." She was surprised to see them together. She sat up in bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. Tiago could not see her like this any more, for he was not her true husband. Manuel moved across the room while Tiago stayed by the door. Standing before her, he spoke, His voice resounded in finality. I went to see Father Silvio earlier, and he told me what he told you. I'm a sinner, she said quietly. You aren't. I do not care what the church says. You did nothing wrong. Neither did Tiago. In fact, he did exactly what I would have wished for. He paused for a moment, then continued softly. Had I died. But the church, she murmured. Tiago spoke next, his voice low but firm. Damn the church. They think they know God, but they cling to rigid rules like this and act as if you are a marked woman. No, it's not right. Manuel sat beside her and ran his fingers gently down her face, the moonlight catching on his one good eye. I told Father Silvio that I had no intention of letting you separate from the baby, and that I had no intention of turning Tiago out. For that, he has excommunicated the four of us. Excommunicated? She gasped. That means we go to hell, Manuel. All of us. Manuel stood from the bed and crossed the room to the cradle. He lifted the sleeping bundle into his arms. He turned and looked at her. We're leaving this village, to a place where nobody knows us. We will tell people that this is my child and that Tiago is my brother. Because he is my brother, to me at least. We leave in the morning. She looked at Tiago in disbelief. You agreed to this? He nodded. I did. It's best for everyone. My parents? Your parents? She asked. We've already spoken to them. They will all join us, Manuel added. Where will we go? She asked. The two men looked at each other and spoke in unison. Spain. The afternoon sun rose high in the sky as Manuel and Tiago loaded the last of their parents' items into the 3 wagons they would be taking with them. They had spent the rest of the night packing up the small cabin that Inês had shared, first with Manuel, then with Tiago. The horses whinnied as she climbed up onto the platform that allowed her to look at their rear ends. Tiago handed up the baby and followed suit. Manuel himself then climbed aboard, all 4 excommunicated church members in the same wagon, taking the same journey, with family in tow. Manuel lifted the reins and gave them a snap. The horses started to move down the dirt road. He looked to his right at Tiago, and then to his left at Inês. I never asked the baby's name, he said aloud. She touched his shoulder as she answered. We named him Manuel. She watched as Manuel smiled, his one eye gleaming with delight. Manuel, that's a strong name, eh, Tiago? Manuel. You've been listening to World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches. If this episode stayed with you, if it stirred something quiet or left you in stillness, share it, follow the show, leave a rating, help keep these stories alive. Our first collection now lives on Kindle. Search World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches, Volume 1 in your Kindle app, and carry these echoes with you. For glimpses behind the curtain and stories between the stories, join me on Instagram at WWIPod_HennyB. And if you'd like to see your name in the credits, become a producer. Visit our Patreon at patreon.com/World War I Stories and help power the next tale into existence. Thank you for walking back in time with me.